The art of preserving all kinds of animal and vegetable substances for several years, 2nd ed. The art of preserving all kinds of animal and vegetable substances for several years. Section I. All the expedients hitherto made use of for preserving alimentary and medicinal substances may be reduced to two principal methods, that of desiccation and that of mingling in greater or less quantities. A foreign substance for the purpose of impeding fermentation or putrefaction. It is by the former of these methods that we are furnished with smoked and hung meat, dried fish, fruits, and vegetables. By the latter, we obtain fruits and other vegetable substances preserved in sugar, the juices and decoctions of plants reduced to syrups and essences, all kinds of pickles, salted meat, and vegetables. But each of these modes has its peculiar inconveniences. Desiccation takes away the odor, changes the taste of the juices, and hardens the fibrous or pulpy matter, the parenchyma. Sugar, from the strength of its own flavor, conceals and destroys in part other flavors, even that, the enjoyment of which we wish to preserve, such as the pleasant acidity of many fruits. A second inconvenience is this, that a large quantity of sugar is required in order to preserve a small quantity of some other vegetable matter, and hence the use of it is not only very costly, but even in many cases pernicious. Thus the juices of certain plants cannot be reduced to a syrup or essence, but by means of nearly double the quantity of sugar. It results from this, that those syrups or essences contain much more sugar than any medicinal substance, and that most frequently the sugar counteracts the operation of the medicine and is hurtful to the patient. Salt communicates an unpleasant acerbity to substances, hardens the animal fiber, and renders it difficult of digestion. It contracts the animal parenchyma. C, on the other hand, as it is indispensable to remove, by means of water, the greater part of the salt employed, almost all the principles which are soluble in cold water are lost when the salt is taken away. There remains nothing but the fibrous matter, or parenchyma, and even that, as has been said, undergoes a change. C. The salt meat with which the crews of vessels are fed appears to be one of the principal causes of the scurvy. It seems that the same causes which operate to prevent the fermentation of meat renders it also difficult of digestion. Though a small quantity of salt may be an obstacle in the way of putrefaction, the too abundant and frequent use which is made of it must cause great obstructions in the smaller vessels of the body, and these obstructions cannot fail to overload the stomach of men who have to digest dry vegetables and biscuits, which sailors advanced in years are not always able to chew completely. Bad digestion and obstruction in the smaller vessels may occasionally give rise to ulcers in the mouth and spots, which denote the scurvy. Santé de Marins by Duhamel. Vinegar can seldom be made use of, but in the preparation of certain articles for seasoning. I shall not enter into any details concerning what has been said and published on the art of preserving alimentary substances. I shall only observe that as far as my knowledge extends, no author, either ancient or modern, has ever pointed out or even led to the suspicion of the principle which is the basis of the method I propose. It is known how much, within a certain period, the public attention, both at Paris and in the departments, has been directed towards the means of diminishing the consumption of sugar by supplying its place by the use of various extracts or essences of indigenous substances. The government, whose philanthropic views are turned towards all useful objects, does not cease to invite all those who pursue the arts and sciences to investigate the means of drawing the utmost advantage from the productions of our soil, in order to develop, to the utmost, our agriculture and manufactures, and so diminish the consumption of foreign commodities. In order to attain the same end, the Society for the Promotion of National Industry stimulates, by the offer of flattering rewards, all those whose talents and labors are directed towards discoveries, from which the nation and humanity may draw substantial benefits. Animated by this laudable zeal, the Agricultural Society, by its resolution of the 21st of June, 1809, and its official notification of it, the 15th of the July following, made an appeal to the whole nation, in order to collect all the information and documents which might contribute to the composition of a work on the art of preserving, by the best possible means, every kind of alimentary substance. La Société d'Encouragement pour l'Industrie Nationale. It was after invitations of so great weight that I resolved to make known a method of effecting this object of great facility in the execution, and at the same time very cheap, and which, by the extension it admits of, may afford numerous advantages to society. This method is not a vain theory. It is the fruit of reflection, investigation, long attention, and numerous experiments, the results of which, for more than 10 years, have been so surprising that, notwithstanding the proof acquired by repeated practice, that provisions may be preserved 2, 3, and 6 years, there are many persons who still refuse to credit the fact. Brought up to the business of preserving alimentary substance by the received methods, having spent my days in the pantries, the breweries, storehouses, and cellars of champagne, as well as in the shops, manufactories, and warehouses of confectioners, distillers, and grocers, accustomed to superintend establishments of this kind for 45 years, I have been able to avail myself, in my process, of a number of advantages, which the greater number of those persons have not possessed, who have devoted themselves to the art of preserving provisions. I owe to my extensive practice, and more especially to my long perseverance, the conviction, first, that fire has the peculiar property not only of changing the combination of the constituent parts of vegetable and animal productions, but also of retarding, for many years at least, if not of destroying, the natural tendency of those same productions to decomposition. 2d. That the application of fire in a manner variously adapted to various substances, after having with the utmost care, and as completely as possible, deprived them of all contact with the air, effects a perfect preservation of those same productions, with all their natural qualities. Before I state the details of my process, I ought to observe that it consists principally, first, in enclosing in bottles the substances to be preserved. 2d. In corking the bottles with the utmost care, for it is chiefly on the corking that the success of the process depends. 3d. In submitting these enclosed substances to the action of boiling water in a water bath, balneum mariae, for a greater or less length of time, according to their nature, and in the manner pointed out with respect to each several kind of substance. Fourth, in withdrawing the bottles from the water bath at the period described. Section 2. Description of my rooms set apart for carrying on the process on a large scale. My laboratory consists of 4 apartments. The first of these is furnished with all kinds of kitchen utensils, stoves, and other apparatus necessary for dressing the animal substances to be preserved, as well as with a kettle for broth, gravy, and containing 180 French pints, raised on brickwork. This kettle is provided with a pot to be put within it, pierced with holes like a skimmer, with divisions for holding various kinds of meat and poultry. This pot can be put into and taken out of the kettle with ease. The kettle is provided with a wide cock, to which is fitted, within, a little rose, like that of a watering pot, covered with a piece of bolting cloth. In this way I can procure broth or gravy quite clear and ready to be put into bottles. It is obvious that for the use of private families and for carrying on the process on a small scale, nothing further will be requisite than such vessels and other conveniences as are found in every house in the country, where provisions are cured for the consumption of the family during winter. The second apartment is appropriated to the preparing of milk, cream, and whey. The third is used for corking and tying the bottles and vessels, and putting them into bags. The fourth is furnished with 3 large copper boilers, placed upon stones raised on brickwork. These boilers are all furnished with a stout lid, fitted to rest upon the vessels within. Each boiler is furnished with a wide cock below, in order to let out the water at a proper time. These large boilers are destined to receive, generally, all the objects intended to be preserved, in order to apply the action of heat to them in a suitable manner, and thus they constitute so many water baths, ff. The reason why it is necessary that large boilers should be furnished with wide cocks is that it would take up too much time to let so large a body of water, always placed over a heated stove, remain till it became cool, and that, on the other hand, it would do great injury to those substances to let them remain too long exposed to the heat. Without inconvenience, therefore, in private families, any cauldron or earthen vessel may be taken for a water bath, provided the water rises to the rim of the bottle. In case there should be no vessel sufficiently high, the bottles may be laid down in the water bath, care being taken to pack them well together, lest they should be broken. Many operations have succeeded well with me this way. The corks are somewhat more liable to burst outwards, but if the bottles are well corked, there is nothing to be feared. For instance, it would not be advisable to lay on their sides bottles or other vessels stopped up with stoppers consisting of different pieces of any substance, because the action of the fire upon this kind of stopper is stronger. And however well the vessel might be corked, it would not be advisable to incur the risque. Small water baths are the more convenient, because they may be placed anywhere and removed at will. They soon become cold. The bottles are taken out when the water is sufficiently cool to allow of the finger being put in, and thus the operation is terminated. The utensils which furnish the third apartment for the preparatory process consist of 1. Rows of bottle racks round the room. 2. A reel for the iron wire, to be used for binding the necks of the bottles and other vessels. Fig. 1. 3. Shears and pincers for tying on the corks. Fig. 6. 4. Machine for twisting the iron wire after it has been divided and cut to a proper length. Fig. 2. 5. 2 instruments forming a lever and used for compressing and as it were biting the corks. Fig. 3. 6. A bottle boot or block, standing on 3 legs and provided with a strong bat for corking. Fig. 5. 7. A stool standing on 5 legs, for tying on the corks. Fig. 4. 8. A sufficient quantity of linen bags, for covering the bottles and other vessels. 9. 2 stools covered with leather and stuffed with hay, in order to shake the bottles upon them, and in that way force a greater number of peas and other small substances into the bottles. 10. A press for the juice of plants, fruits, and herbs, with pans, vessels, sieves, and everything else that belongs to it. Besides my laboratory, consisting of these articles, I have fitted up 3 apartments. The first, for preparing vegetables, it is furnished with dressers all round. The second, for storing up and preparing all kinds of fruit. The third is a cellar, furnished with bottle racks, for rinsing and setting by the bottles and other vessels, as in a storehouse. I have the precaution to keep the bottles and other vessels I may want, ready rinsed at hand. I am also supplied with an assortment of corks, compressed and bit in the instrument already described. When every preparation is thus made, the process is half done. The principle by which all alimentary substances are preserved and kept fresh is invariable in its effects. The result in particular experiments depends upon the fitness of each individual application of the principle to the substance, which is to be preserved, according to its peculiar qualities, but in every case, the exclusion of air is a precaution of the utmost importance to the success of the operation, and in order to deprive alimentary substances of contact with the air, a perfect knowledge of bottles and the vessels to be used, of corks and corking, is requisite. Section 3. Of bottles and vessels. I chose glass as being the matter most impenetrable by air, and have not ventured to make any experiment with a vessel made of any other substance. The ordinary bottles have generally necks too small and ill-made. They are also too weak to resist the blows from the bat and the action of the fire. I, therefore, caused bottles to be made for my especial use, with wider necks, and those necks made with a projecting rim or ring on the interior surface, placed below and resembling, in form, the rim which is at the top of the exterior surface of the necks of bottles. My object was that when the cork had been forced into the neck of the bottle, 3/4 of its length, in the manner already described, it should be compressed in the middle. In this manner, the bottle is perfectly corked on the outside as well as within. It thus opposes an obstacle to the swelling or expansion, which arises from the operation of heat upon the substance enclosed within the bottle. This mode of forming the neck of the bottle is so much the more indispensable, as I have repeatedly known the swelling to be so strong as to push out corks of 3 or 4 lines in length, though confined by 2 iron wires crossed. The bottles and vessels should be made of a tough substance, _de matière liante_, the former having the weight of 25 or 26 ounces for each _liter g that the bottle contains. The glass ought to be of equal thickness in every part, or it is liable to break in the water bath. The form of the champagne bottle is most convenient. It is the handsomest as well as the strongest, and is of the best shape for packing up. G. The French _liter_ consists of nearly 2 wine pints and a half, English measure. Section 4. Of corks. Economy in corks is generally very unwise, as in order to save a very trifle in the price of cork, a risk is incurred of losing the valuable commodity it is intended to preserve. As corking is made use of in order to preserve and meliorate certain articles, by depriving them of all contact with the air, too much attention cannot be given to the good quality of the cork, which should be of 18 or 20 lines in length and of the finest quality. Experience has so fully satisfied me on this point that I never make use of any but superfine corks. These are, in the end, the cheapest. I further take the precaution of compressing and, as it were, biting the cork 3/4 of its length by means of the instrument already described, _fig. 3 beginning at the small end. The cork is rendered more supple, the pores of the cork are brought closer, it is somewhat lengthened, and its thickness is so much diminished at the extremity which is put into the mouth of the bottle, that a large cork may be made to enter a very moderate opening. The action of the heat within the vessel is such that the cork swells within, and the corking is thus rendered perfect. Section V. Of corking. After what has been just said, the absolute necessity will be apparent of having good bottles, with a projecting rim of equal thickness all round within the neck. Excellent superfine corks are also indispensable, which have been compressed in the instrument 3/4 of their length. Before I cork, I take care that the bottles containing liquor are filled only up to within 3 inches of the outer rim, lest they should burst from the bubbling and swelling occasioned by the application of heat to the water. When the bottles contain vegetables, fruit, and they may be filled up to within 2 inches of the rim. I place the full bottle upon the bottle boot already mentioned, before which I seat myself. This apparatus is to be supplied with a strong wooden bat, a small pot full of water, and a sharp knife, greased with a little suet or soap, for cutting off the tops of the corks, which ought never to be raised much above the head of the bottles. These arrangements being made, I place the bottle boot between my legs, and taking a cork of fit size, I dip 1/2 of it into the little pot of water in order to facilitate its entrance, and having wiped the end, I then put it to the mouth of the bottle, at the same time turning it round. I hold it in this position with my left hand, which I keep steady, that the bottle may stand upright. I take the bat in my right hand in order to drive in the cork by force of blows. When I find, at the first or second blow of the bat, that the cork has somewhat entered, I take my hand from the cork in order to hold with it the neck of the bottle, which I fix firmly and upright upon the bottle boot, and, by dint of repeated blows, I continue to drive in my cork 3/4 of its length. The quarter of the cork which remains above the bottle, after having refused to yield any further to the redoubled blows of the bat, assures me, in the first place, that the bottle is completely corked, and this same residue serves also to hold the double-crossed iron wire which is necessary to bind fast the cork, that it may be able to resist the action of heat on the water bath. I must repeat again that too much attention cannot be given to the corking. No circumstance, however minute, ought to be neglected, in order to effect the rigorous exclusion of the air from the substance to be preserved, air being a most destructive agent. and the one which is most sedulously to be counteracted in the course of the process. Many persons believe they have corked well when they have forced the cork even with the mouth of the bottle, but this is a great mistake. On the contrary, whenever the whole of the cork, instead of withstanding the blows of the bat, is forced into the bottle, it is advisable to draw it out and substitute another in its place. Thus the believing that a bottle corked very low is well corked, because no liquor escapes when the bottle is turned with its neck downwards, is an error, which, joined to the use of bad corks, causes a number of losses. He who corks with care and judgment is satisfied that the operation has been performed well by the resistance of the cork to the blows of the bat, and never thinks of turning the neck of the bottle downwards. It is besides sufficient to reflect on the punctures met with in cork, and on all the hidden defects which may subsist in the interior even of the finest cork, by means of which the air may be introduced, in order to be convinced of the propriety of making use of none but the very best corks, and that, after having well compressed them in the machine for that purpose, and also of corking them so closely that they become very much compressed in the middle. It is in this way only that losses can be prevented from frequently taking place, which have often no other cause than bad corking. For, if a bottle does not instantly run when carelessly corked, it proceeds from this circumstance, that the air has not had time to penetrate through the apertures which may be in the interior of the cork, and, in fact, how different is the quality of wine, drawn from the same cask. And how many bottles do we meet with, which have lost more or less of their contents? The bottles being well stopped up, I then fasten the cork down with a couple of iron wires crossed. This is an easy operation, and anyone can do it, who has once seen it done. I then put each bottle in a bag of canvas or coarse linen cloth, made for the purpose, sufficiently large to wrap up the whole of the bottle up to the very cork. These bags are made in the shape of a muff, open alike at both ends. One of these ends is drawn with a string running in a gutter, leaving an opening of about the width of a crown piece. The other end is provided with a couple of small strings, in order to tie the bag round the neck of the bottle. By means of these bags, I can dispense with the use of hay or straw in packing up the bottles in the water bath, and, whenever any one of them breaks, the fragments are preserved in the bag. I am spared a great deal of trouble and a number of inconveniences which I had formerly to sustain, in picking up the pieces of the bottle out of the straw or hay I then made use of. After having spoken of bottles, their form and quality, of stoppers, and the length of the fine cork of which they ought to be composed, of the corking and tying, of bags, their form and utility, I proceed to give an idea of vessels with large necks, that is, glass jars, which I make use of for preserving solid and bulky substances, such as poultry, game, meat, fish, and sea. These jars have necks of 2, 3, or 4 inches diameter, and are of a larger or smaller size. Like bottles, they are furnished with a projecting rim, not only in order to strengthen the neck, but also for receiving the iron wire destined to bind the corks. I have not yet been able to procure from the glass houses a similar projecting rim in the interior of the neck of these jars, as I have in that of the bottles. The completely corking up these vessels is, from this circumstance, rendered more difficult and demands a special care. I met with another obstacle in the cork itself, from its thinness, more especially when the cork was very fine, and also from its ascending pores being against the grain. I was therefore obliged to form stoppers of 3 or 4 pieces of cork, from 20 to 24 lines in length, placed together the way of the grain, the pores of the cork being placed horizontally, by means of isinglass prepared in the following manner. I melted over the fire 4 drams of well-beaten isinglass, in 8 ounces of water. When melted, I caused it to run through fine linen, and then put it again over the fire in order to reduce it to 1/3 of its volume. After which I added an ounce of good foolproof brandy. I then left the whole on the fire till it became reduced to about 3 ounces. I then put the glue thus prepared in a little pot over live coals, and took care to warm my pieces of cork. I then slightly smeared over the pieces of cork with a brush, in order to glue them together. When the pieces composing the stopper were well fixed and glued together, I then fixed a tight thread to the 2 extremities of the stopper, in order to keep the pieces together, and let them dry. either in the sun or in a gentle heat for about a fortnight. At the end of this time, I took a cork maker's knife and cut my stoppers of a proper shape, and having always fitted them to the mouth of the jar, they have never proved defective. Having corked my jars and driven in the stopper by means of the bat, the bottles being always placed upright in the bottle boot, I made use of a compound luting. This luting, communicated to me by Mr. Bardell, is made of quicklime, which is slaked in the air by being sprinkled with water till it becomes reduced to a powder. The powder to be kept in this state in corked bottles ready for use. This lime mixed with a cheese made of skimmed milk, fromage à la pie and formed to the thickness of paste, produces a luting which hardens rapidly and which withstands the heat of boiling water. I besmear the whole of the outside of the stopper with this luting, and I cover the edge of the jar with hemp and strips of linen placed above and close to the stopper, and hanging down to the rim. Farther, that the iron wire may have force enough to keep down the stopper, I put a piece of cork 7 or 8 lines high and 16 or 18 lines in diameter in the middle of the large stopper, which is itself too big to allow the wire to have any effect upon it. By means of this second cork, placed in the middle of the large stopper, I am able to make the wire take a proper hold of the cork and give due strength and solidity to the stopper. When everything has thus been foreseen and prepared, and, above all things, well corked, tied, and wrapped up in bags, there remains nothing to be done, but to apply the preserving principle, that is, _heat_ to the substances duly arranged. And this is the most easy part of the operation. I place all the vessels, bottles, or jars upright in a boiler, which I then fill with cold water up to the necks of the vessels. I then cover the boiler with its lid, which is made to rest upon the vessels. I cover the upper part of the lid with a piece of wet linen, in order that the sides of the lid may exactly fit, and all evaporation from the water bath be impeded as much as possible. When the boiler has been thus filled and adjusted, I light the fire beneath. When the water bath begins to boil, I take care to maintain the same degree of heat for the greater or less quantity of time required by the substances exposed to its influence. When this time has elapsed, I then instantly put out the fire by means of a coal extinguisher, _éteignoir_. After the fire has been put out a quarter of an hour, I let out the water of the bath by means of the cock. After the water has been withdrawn half an hour, I uncover the boiler, and I do not take out the bottles till 1 or 2 hours after the uncovering. And this terminates the operation. The next day or a fortnight afterwards, for that is immaterial, I place my bottles on shelves, as I do wine, in a cool and shady place. If I purpose sending them a great distance, I think it worth while to pitch them before I place them on the shelves. Otherwise, this last operation is not absolutely necessary. I have now by me bottles which have been 3 years lying under a staircase, the substances contained in which retain as much flavor as if they were just prepared, and yet they were never pitched. We have just seen, from all that has been said, that alimentary substances, in order to be preserved, should be, without exception, subjected to the application of heat in a water bath, after being rigorously excluded from all contact with the air, in the manner and with the precautions already indicated. The preserving principle is, as I have already observed, invariable in its effects. Thus every loss I have sustained from any of the articles being spoiled had no other cause than an erroneous application of the principle or some negligence or omission in the preparatory process already pointed out. It sometimes happens to me even now that my operations do not perfectly succeed, but no man makes experiments in any of the arts, or in any branch of natural philosophy, without being liable to disappointment. Nor can anyone, therefore, who is employed in such a process as mine, flatter himself that he may not sometimes find his commodities spoiled from some defect in a vessel, or in the interior of a cork. But in fact, when due attention is given, these losses seldom take place. Section 6. The means of distinguishing among the bottles or jars, as they are taken from the boiler, such of them as, from some neglect in the preparatory process, some accident, or the action of the fire, are in danger of occasioning a loss, or spoiling the substances enclosed in them, underscore when the operation is completed, of whatever kind it may be, I take the greatest care in my power to examine all the bottles and jars one by one, as I take them from the boiler. I have remarked in some defects in the glass as stars and cracks occasioned by the action of the heat in the water bath, or by the tying, when the mouth of the vessel has been too weak. I have observed in others a moisture round the stopper or little spots near the mouth, from which I inferred that part of the substance enclosed had oozed out during the dilation or expansion produced by the heat of the water bath. These are the two principal observations that usually occur to me, and whenever I observe either of these appearances on any bottle, I always set it aside and make use of the substance immediately, that nothing may be lost. The first of the flaws pointed out arises from the quality and originally bad structure of the bottle, but the second may arise from any one of four causes. 1. From a bad cork. 2. From bad corking. 3. From the bottle having been filled too near the brim. And 4. From bad tying. A single one of these faults is sufficient to spoil a bottle more easily, therefore a complication of them. In the applying of heat to the water bath, I have had various obstacles to encounter, more particularly when peas were to be preserved, for peas are of all substances the most difficult to preserve completely. This vegetable, when gathered while it is too young or too tender, dissolves in water, and in consequence the bottle is found half empty, and even this half is not fit to be kept. Hence, whenever this circumstance occurs, I set aside the bottle and make use of the article immediately. If the peas have been gathered 2 or 3 days, the heat occasions them to lose all their flavor. They become hard. They ferment before the operation. The bottles break in the water bath with an explosion. Those which resist the first heat break afterwards, or are faulty, and this is easily recognized by the liquor in the bottle, which becomes turbid, while peas which are well preserved leave the liquid pellucid. It is not necessary to recommend dispatch and the utmost cleanliness in the preparation of alimentary substances. This is absolutely indispensable, more especially in what respects the substances themselves, which are to be preserved. I take care to have all my preparatory arrangements made before I begin the process, that there may be no waiting, and that the best use may be made of the time employed in carrying it on. Description of my process, as applied to the various articles intended to be preserved. Section 7. Boiled meat. Pot au feu de ménage. I put a quantity of meat into the pot to be boiled in the ordinary way. When it was 3/4 boiled, I took out 1/2 of it, the bones of which I had already taken off, as I purposed to preserve it. When the meat was completely boiled, I strained the broth, and after it had become cool, I put it in bottles which I corked well, tied and wrapped up in their several bags. The beef which I had taken out when 3/4 done, I put into jars which I filled up with a part of the same broth. Having corked, luted, and tied up these, and wrapped them in bags, I placed them and the bottles containing the broth upright in a cauldron or boiler. I filled this boiler with cold water up to the rim of the bottles and jars. I put the lid upon the boiler, causing it to rest on the vessels within, and took care to surround it with a wet linen cloth, in order to impede as much as possible any evaporation from the water bath. I heated the boiler, and when the water bath had been made to boil, I kept up the same degree of heat for an hour, and, precisely at the end of the hour, let the fire pass into an extinguisher. Half an hour afterwards, I let off the water from the bath, by means of the cock at the bottom of the boiler. At the end of another half hour I took off the lid. An hour or 2 afterwards, I took out the bottles and jars. The time of doing this is, however, immaterial, and the operator will consult his own convenience. The next day I besmeared the corks with rosin, in order to forward the bottles and jars to different seaports. At the end of a year, and a year and half, the broth and boiled meat were found as good as if made the day they were eaten. Section 8. Gravy. In the year 12, having reason to hope that I should be employed to provide some nourishing provisions for the sick on board His Majesty's vessels, in consequence of some experiments which had already been made in the seaports, by order of His Excellency the Minister of the Marine and Colonies, on alimentary productions preserved according to my method, I made the necessary arrangement for fulfilling the orders I had reason to expect. In consequence, that I might not want too many bottles and jars, and that I might be able to condense the substance of 8 messes in a bottle of the size of 1_liter_, I made the following experiment. As, in general, evaporation cannot take place, but at the expense of the object to be condensed, 1. I made some gravy, in the proportion of 2 pounds of good meat and poultry to 1_liter_. My gravy being made and strained and suffered to become cool, I put it in bottles. After having well corked and tied the bottles and wrapped them in bags, I placed them in the boiler. I had taken out, when 1/4 dressed, the best pieces of the beef and poultry. When these were grown cold, I put them in jars and filled the jars with the same gravy. Having well corked, luted, tied, and wrapped up these jars, I set them upright in the same boiler with the bottles of gravy. Having filled the boiler with cold water up to the rim of the bottles and jars, and having covered the lid of the boiler with a wet linen cloth, I heated the water bath. When it was made to boil, I kept up the same degree of heat for 2 hours, and completed this operation as I did the preceding. 1. Jellies, essences of meat, the substance of ice, and portable soups, which are prepared from the soft and white parts of animals, preserved at a great expense by means of evaporation, and drying in stoves with the aid of hartshorn and isinglass, furnish merely factitious elements, without flavor or any other than a burnt or moldy taste. The beef and fowls were found well dressed, and were kept, as well as the gravy, for more than 2 years. Section 9. Broth or jelly. I composed this jelly, according to the prescription of a physician, of calves' feet and lights, red cabbage, carrots, turnips, onions, and leeks, taking a sufficient quantity of each. A quarter of an hour before I took this jelly from the fire, I added some sugar candy with some Senegal gum. I strained it as soon as it was made. After it was cold, it was put in bottles, which were corked, tied, wrapped up in bags, and put in the water bath, which was kept boiling 1/4 of an hour, and this jelly was preserved and remained as good as it was the day on which it was made. Section X. Round of beef, fillet of mutton, fowls, and young partridges. I prepared all these articles as if for common use, but only 3/4 dressed, the young partridges being roasted. When they were grown cold, I put these articles separately into jars of a sufficient size. Having well corked, luted, tied, and wrapped them up, I put them all into the water bath, which was kept on the boil for half an hour. They were forwarded to Brest, and from thence were sent to sea for 4 months and 10 days, together with some vegetables, gravy, and preserved milk, all well packed up in a chest. When opened, 18 different kinds of preserved food were tasted, every one of which had retained its freshness, and not a single substance had undergone the least change at sea. To the experiments made with these 4 kinds of provisions, I can add 2 others made by myself, the one, a fricassee of fowls, and the other, a matelot of eels, carp, and pike, with an addition of sweetbread, mushrooms, onions, butter, and anchovies, all dressed in white wine. The fricassee and the matelot were perfectly preserved. These results prove sufficiently that the same principle, applied with the same preparatory process and with the same care and precautions, in general preserves all animal productions. But it is to be observed that in the previous cooking of each articles, it is to be only 3/4 dressed at the utmost, in order that the remainder of the requisite cooking may be communicated by means of the water bath. There are a number of articles which can bear an additional hour of boiling in the water bath without any danger, as broth, gravy, jellies, and the essences of meat, poultry, and ham, the juice of the grape and of plants, and sea. But there are also others which will sustain a great injury from a quarter of an hour's or even a minute's too much boiling. Thus the result will always depend upon the dexterity, intelligence, and judgment of the operator. J.J., the celebrated Chaptal, says, in his _Elements de Chimie, Discars Preliminaire _p. Xi. We hear in manufactories of nothing but the _caprice of experiment but this vague phrase has its origin only in the ignorance in which the workmen are of the true principles of their art. For nature does not act according to any principle of discernment, but obeys constant laws. The dead matter which we employ in our manufactories exhibits necessary effects in which the will can have no share and, consequently, can have no caprice. Make yourself acquainted, we should say to the manual operator, with the substance on which you are to operate. Study better the principles of your art, and you will be able to foresee, predict, and calculate everything. It is your ignorance alone which renders your operations a constant groping in the dark and a discouraging alternation of success and disappointment. In fact, the operator who proceeds with a perfect knowledge of the principles of his art and of the results of its application will never ascribe the failure of his process to caprice, but will impute it to the neglect of some indispensable precaution in the application of his principle, and his disappointment will serve as a guide for him to calculate better and improve his preparatory process. Convinced that the effects that flow from his principle are invariable, he knows that every kind of loss and damage can proceed only from an error in the application of his principle. Section 11. New-laid eggs. The more fresh the egg is, the longer it withstands the heat of the water bath. I consequently took eggs the day they had been laid, placed them in a jar, with raspings of bread, to fill up the vacuities and secure them against breaking when removed to a distance. Having well corked, tied, and luted the jars, and c. I placed them in a boiler of a proper size, K, to give them 75 degrees of heat, L. Having taken the water bath from the fire, I took out the eggs as soon as the water was so cool that I could put my finger in it. I then took out the eggs and kept them 6 months. At the end of that period, I took the eggs out of the jar, put them into cold water which I set on the fire, and heated it to 75 degrees. I found them fit to dip a toast of bread into, and as fresh as when I prepared them. As to hard eggs, which are to be cut into slices and fricasseed, I heat the water bath 80 degrees, and as soon as it begins to boil, I remove the water bath from the fire. K. This operation, performed on a great scale, that is in a larger boiler, would require too much exactness, as it would be more difficult to command just the due degree of heat in such a boiler than in a small water bath, which may be set on and taken off at pleasure. L. That is, of _Reamer_, or 200 of _Fahrenheit_. In like manner, the 80 of Reamer, or boiling point mentioned below, is 212 of Fahrenheit. T. Section 12. Milk. I took 12 liters of milk fresh from the cow. I condensed it in the water bath and reduced it to 2/3 of its volume, frequently skimming it. Then I strained it through a bolting cloth. When cold, I took from it the skim which had risen while it was cooling and bottled it, with the usual process, and afterwards put it in the water bath which I let boil for 2 hours, and at the end of several months, I perceived that the cream had separated itself and was swimming in the bottle in the form of flakes. To obviate this inconvenience, I made a second experiment on a like quantity of milk which I condensed in the water bath, reducing it to 1/2, instead of 1/3, as I had done the former. I then added to the milk, so reduced, the yolks of 8 new-laid eggs well beaten. Having left the whole thus well mingled half an hour on the fire, I completed the experiment as before. This expedient perfectly succeeded. The yolk of egg had so completely combined all the particles that at the end of a year, and even of 18 months, the milk remained as fresh as when I put it in the bottles. The first also was preserved more than 2 years. The cream which was in flakes disappeared when put on the fire. Both sustained the boiling alike. From both, butter and whey were afterwards obtained. In the different experiments and chemical analyses to which they were exposed, it was found that the last, being much the better, was equal to the best cream sold at Paris to drink with coffee. Section 13. Cream. I took 5 liters of cream taken with care from milk of the preceding evening. I condensed it in the water bath to 4 liters without skimming it. I took off the skim which was formed above, in order to strain it through a bolting cloth afterwards, and let it cool. After having taken off the skim which had risen while cooling, I put it in half bottles, observing the usual process, and let the water bath boil for 1 hour. At the end of 2 years, this cream was found as fresh as if prepared the same day. I made some good fresh butter with it, making from 4 to 5 ounces of butter from half a liter of cream. Section 14. Whey. I prepared some whey by the ordinary process. When clarified and grown cold, I put it in bottles and let it remain in the water bath which was boiling 1 hour. However well the whey may be clarified, when put into the water bath, the application of the heat always detaches some particles of cheese which are deposited. I preserved some in this way 2 and 3 years, and before I made use of it, I strained it that it might be very clear. On an emergency, you may content yourself with carefully decanting the whey for this purpose. Section 15. Of vegetables. As the difference of climates renders the productions of different countries more or less early, and varies their qualities, kinds, and denominations, attention will be given by the operator to the circumstances of the spot in which he resides. For this reason, the translator adds the original names of the vegetables spoken of. It may happen that some of the kinds of fruits and roots mentioned by the author do not exactly correspond with those which are considered as the same in this country. Whatever peculiarities there may be in the articles themselves, these will hardly affect the treatment they have to undergo in the process of preserving them. Tea. At Paris and its environs, June and July are the best months for preserving green peas, petit pois verts small Windsor beans, petites fèves de marais and asparagus, asperge At a later period, these vegetables suffer greatly from heat and dryness. In August and September I preserve artichokes, artichauts French beans, haricots verts et blancs and cauliflowers, choux-fleurs In general, all vegetables intended to be preserved should be used as recently gathered as possible, and prepared with the utmost rapidity, so that there should be, as it were, but one step from the garden bed to the water bath. Section 16. Green peas, petit pois verts, the clamart and the crochu are the 2 kinds of peas which I prefer, especially the latter, which is the most juicy and sweet of all, as well as the earliest, except the Michaud Hastings, which is the first pea, but this kind is not fit to be preserved. I gather the peas when they are not too young and tender, for they are apt to dissolve in water during the operation. I take them when they are of a middling size. They are then in a more perfect state, and have an infinitely finer taste and flavor. I shell them as soon as they are gathered. I separate the large ones, and they are then put in bottles, the bottles being for that purpose placed on the stool before mentioned, in order that as many peas as possible may, by shaking the bottle, be made to go into them. I then cork the bottles and put them in the water bath, which is made to boil for 1.5 hours, if the season be cool and moist, and 2 hours in a dry and hot season, and I terminate the operation as before. I also put in bottles the larger peas, which I had separated from those which were more delicate. These, also, I put into the water bath, which I let boil according to the season, 2 hours or 2 hours and a half. Section 17. Asparagus, asperge, I clean the asparagus as if for ordinary use, either with the stalk or the buds only. Before I put them in bottles or jars, I plunge them into boiling water and afterwards into cold water in order to take away the peculiar sharpness of this vegetable. The stalks are placed in the jars with great care, the heads being downwards. The buds are put in bottles. After both are well drained, I cork the bottles and I put them in the water bath, where they remain only till the water thoroughly boils. Section 18. Windsor beans, petites fèves de marais, neither the feverel the small dried bean, nor the julienne which resembles it, are fit to be preserved. I make use of the genuine Windsor or broad bean, which is of the thickness and breadth of the thumb, when ripe. I gather it very small, about the size of the end of the little finger, in order to preserve it with its skin. As the skin becomes brown when in contact with the air, I take the precaution of putting the beans in bottles as soon as shelled. When the bottles are full, the beans having been shaken down gently on the stool, and in that way the vacancies in the bottle having been filled up, I add to each bottle a little bunch of savory. I cork them quickly in order to give them 1 hour's boiling in the water bath. When this vegetable has been quickly gathered, prepared, and preserved, it has a white, greenish color. On the contrary, when the operation has been tardy, it becomes brown and hard. Section 19. Peeled Windsor beans. Fèves de Marais d'Arabes. In order to preserve Windsor beans stripped of their skins, I gather them larger, about ½ an inch long at the utmost. I take off the skin, bottle them with a small bunch of savory, and I put them in the water bath, which is made to boil 1.5 hours. Section XX. French beans. Haricots verts et blancs. The bean known by the name of Baylet_, which resembles the Swiss bean, is the kind fittest to be preserved green, with the pod. It combines uniformity with the best taste. I cause the beans to be gathered as for ordinary use. I string them and put them in bottles, taking care to shake them on the stool, to fill the vacancies in the bottles. I then cork the bottles and put them in the water bath, which is to boil 1.5 hours. When the beans are rather large, I cut them lengthways into 2 or 3 pieces, and then they do not require being in the water bath longer than 1 hour. Of the kinds of haricot, of which the seeds or beans themselves are to be preserved, the _Soissons_ haricot is justly entitled to the preference. For want of that, I take the best of any other species of the _haricot blanc_ that I can meet with. I gather it when the shell begins to turn yellow. I then shell it immediately and bottle it, and I put it in the water bath to give it a 2 hours boiling. Section 21. Artichokes. Artichokes. To preserve artichokes whole, I gather them of a middling size. After having taken off all the useless leaves and pared them, I plunge them into boiling water and immediately afterwards into cold water. Having drained them, I put them into jars which are corked, and they receive 1 hour's boiling. To preserve cut artichokes, _quartiers_, I divide them, taking fine specimens, into 8 pieces. I take out the choke and leave very few of the leaves. I plunge them into boiling water and afterwards into fresh water. Having been drained, they are then placed over the fire in a saucepan, with a piece of fresh butter, seasoning, and fine herbs. When half dressed, they are taken from the fire and set by to cool. They then are put in jars, which are corked, tied, luted, and placed in the water bath, in which they receive ½ an hour's boiling. Section 22. Cauliflowers. Choux-fleurs. I plunge the cauliflower, like the artichoke, in boiling water and then in cold water after having first plucked it. When well drained, I put it in jars which are corked, and I place it in the water bath in order to give it ½ an hour's boiling, and as the seasons vary and are sometimes dry and sometimes moist, it will be soon obvious that it is necessary to study and adapt the various degrees of heat required according to the season. Attention to this circumstance must never be disregarded. For instance, in a cool and damp year, vegetables are more tender and consequently more sensible to the action of fire. In this case, the water bath should be made to boil 7 or 8 minutes less, and in dry seasons, when vegetables are firmer and better support the action of fire, 7 or 8 minutes boiling should be added. Section 23. Sorrel. Océal. I gather océal sorrel, beldame n, noire beet, laitue lettuce, surfuel chervil, sibyl green onion, and in fit proportions. When they have all been well plucked, washed, drained, and minced, I cause the whole to be stewed together in a copper vessel well tinned. These vegetables ought to be well stewed, as if for daily use, and not dried up and burned as is often done in families, when it is intended to preserve them. This quantity of stewing is the most fit. When my herbs are thus prepared, I set them to cool in earthen or stone vessels. Afterwards I put them in bottles with a wide mouth. I cork them and see. And I put my sorrel in the water bath, which is allowed a quarter of an hour's boiling merely. This time is sufficient for preserving it 10 years untouched, and as fresh as if it was just taken from the garden. This mode is, without dispute, the best and most economical for families and hospitals, civil and military. It is, above all, most advantageous to the Navy, for sorrel thus prepared may be brought from the Indies, as fresh and savory as if dressed the same day. N, a species of the belladonna very generally made use of as an ingredient in French soups. T. Section 24. Spinach, succory, and other herbs. Epinards et chicories. Sorrel and succory are prepared as if for daily use. When fresh gathered, plucked, scalded, cooled, squeezed, and minced, I put them in bottles and see. To give them a quarter of an hour's boiling in the water bath and see. Carrots, cabbages, turnips, parsnips, onions, potatoes, celery, chardons, cardons d'Espagne, red beet, and, generally, all vegetables may be preserved alike, either simply scalded or prepared with soup, in order to be used when taken out of the vessel. In the first case, I cause the vegetables to be scalded and half-boiled in water with a little salt. I then take them from the water in order to strain them and let them cool, and afterwards put them into bottles and into the water bath. I let the carrots, cabbages, turnips, parsnips, and red beet remain in the water bath while it boils 1 hour, and the onions, potatoes, and celery, and see. Half an hour. In the other case, I prepare my vegetables with soup, either with or without meat, as for ordinary use. When 3/4 boiled and well prepared and seasoned, I take them from the fire to let them cool. Then I put them in bottles and see. And give them a good quarter of an hour's boiling in the water bath. Section 25. A soup called julienne. I compose a julienne of carrots, leeks, turnips, sorrel, French beans, celery, green peas, and C. These I prepare in the ordinary way, which consists in cutting the carrots, turnips, leeks, French beans, and celery into small pieces, either round or long. Having well plucked and washed them, I put these vegetables into a saucepan over the fire, with a largish piece of fresh butter. When these are half done, I add the sorrel and green peas. After the whole has been stewed down, I moisten the vegetables with good gravy, prepared for the purpose, with good meat and poultry. I let the whole boil half an hour. Then I withdraw the fire to let it grow cool, and having put the julienne into bottles and see. I let it boil half an hour in the water bath. Julienne prepared in this way has been kept by me more than 2 years. The julienne omega is prepared in the same manner, except that, instead of gravy, I moisten my vegetables, when well dressed, with a clear vegetable soup, either of French beans, lentils, or large green peas, which I have preserved. And I give it in like manner half an hour's boiling in the water bath. Section 26. Vegetable soup, Coulée de racines, I compose and prepare a vegetable soup in the usual way. I make the soup so rich that a bottle of the size of a liter can supply a dish for 12 persons by adding 2 liters of water to it before it is made use of. When it has grown cool, I put it in bottles to give it half an hour's boiling in the water bath. Section 27. Love apples, tomates, aux pommes d'amour, I gather love apples very ripe, when they have acquired their beautiful color. Having washed and drained them, I cut them into pieces and dissolve them over the fire in a copper vessel well tinned. When they are well dissolved and reduced 1/3 in compass, I strain them through a sieve sufficiently fine to hold the kernels. When the whole has passed through, I replace the decoction on the fire, and I condense it till there remains only 1/3 of the first quantity. Then I let them become cool in stone pans, and put them in bottles and see, in order to give them one good boiling only, in the water bath. I have not yet tried any experiments with the flower of the love apple, but there is no doubt that this new method will furnish means of deriving, at a slight expense, a great value from them also. Section 28. Herbs and medicinal plants. Plants potagers et medicinals. I filled a bottle with mint. Montpoivre. In branches and full of flowers. I stirred it with a stick to make the bottle hold a greater quantity of it. I corked it well and gave it a slight boiling in the water bath. It was perfectly preserved. The same may be done with all plants to be preserved in bunches. The operator will calculate the degree of heat which it will be necessary to give to the several subjects of his experiment. The mode of extracting the juice of plants by means of water has more or less inconvenience. All those juices which have a principle that is very volatile and easy to evaporate lose infinitely, even in warm water, much more so therefore, when the heat of the water is raised to a higher degree, and when the plants have been left for a long time in digestion. Aromatic vegetables are infused, when the object is to preserve the aroma and not impart to the water the extractive principle which the plant contains. Therefore, tea and coffee are made by infusion. But all the theories ancient and modern, and all the new apparatus employed to seize and hold fast the aroma of the coffee are still very deficient. Ebullition, which is oftentimes resorted to in order to extract the aroma of plants by means of distillation, in spite of all the apparatus made use of for keeping the same closed up, most frequently destroys the nature of the productions. Not only are the principles extracted by the water injured by this first operation, but they scarcely retain any strength after the evaporation which it is usual to make them undergo, in order to form essences of them. The extract, therefore, exhibits nothing but the appearance of the soluble and nutritive principles of vegetable and animal substances, since fire, which is necessary to form an essence by means of evaporation, destroys the aroma and almost all the properties of the substance which contains it. Section 29. The juices of herbs. I have succeeded in preserving very well the juices of such plants as lettuce, chervil, borage, bourrache, wild succory, chicory savage, watercresses, crescent de fontaine, and c. I prepared and purified them by the usual process. I corked them and in order to give them one boiling in the water bath. Section XXX. Fruits and their juices. Fruits and their juices require the utmost celerity in the preparatory process, and particularly in the application of heat to the water bath. The fruit which is to be preserved either whole or in quarters ought not to be completely ripe, because it dissolves in the water bath. In like manner it should not be gathered either at the commencement or the end of the season. The first and the last of the crop have neither the fine flavor, nor the perfume of those which are gathered in the height of the season, that is, when the greater part of the crop of each species is ripe at the same period. Section 31. White and red currants in bunches. Groseilles rouges et blanches and grappes. I gather the white and red currants apart, and not too ripe. I collect the finest, and in the finest bunches, and I bottle them, taking care to shake them down on the stool, in order to fill up the vacancies in the bottle. Then I cork them and in order to put them in the water bath, which I am careful to watch closely, and as soon as I perceive it boils, I withdraw the fire rapidly, and a quarter of an hour afterwards draw off the water from the bath by means of the cock and Section 32. White and red currants stripped. Groseilles rouges et blanches grenades. I strip the white and red currants apart. They are immediately put into bottles, and I conclude the operation with the same attention as in preserving the currants in bunches. I preserve a greater quantity of currant stripped than in bunches, as the stalks always give a harshness to the currant juice. Section 33. Cherries, raspberries, mulberries. Cerezas, framboises, mûres et cassis. I gather these fruits before they are too ripe, that they may be less squeezed in the operation. I put them in separate bottles and shake the bottles gently on the stool. I cork them and see. And I complete them in the same manner and with the same care as the currants. Section 34. Juice of red currants. I gather red currants quite ripe and squeeze them upon fine sieves. I put into a press the skins which remain upon the sieves in order to extract all the juice which may be in them, and this I mix with the former juice. I perfume the whole with a little raspberry juice, and I strain this decoction through a sieve finer than those used before. I put the juice in bottles and expose them to the water bath with the same attention as the stripped currants and I proceed in the same manner with the juice of white currants and barberries, épines venettes as well as with that of pomegranates, oranges, and lemons. Section 35. Strawberries. Phrases. I made a number of experiments on the strawberry, and in various ways, without being able to obtain its perfume. I was forced to have recourse to sugar. In consequence, I squeezed some strawberries and strained them through a sieve, as if I were about to make ice. I added half a pound of powdered sugar with the juice of half a lemon to a pound of strawberries. I mixed the whole together and put the decoction in bottles which I corked, and I exposed it to a water bath till it began to boil, and This mode succeeded very well, in every respect, except the color, which was considerably faded, but that may be supplied. Section 36. Apricots. Apricots. For the table, the wild and garden apricot. L apricot commune, et.l apricot pechi. Both taken from trees standing free in the open air, are the best kinds for preservation. I commonly mingle these two kinds together, because the former supports the latter, which has more sugar in it, and which dissolves more from the action of heat. They may nevertheless be prepared apart, provided the precaution be taken of letting the garden peach remain a few minutes less in the water bath than the wild peach. That is, as soon as the water bath begins to boil. The fire is to be taken away from the garden peach, while the fire may be allowed to remain under the wild peach until the water bath completely boils. I gather the apricots when they are ripe, but somewhat firm, when, on being squeezed gently between the fingers, the stone is perceived to detach itself from the fruit. As soon as gathered, I cut them in halves, take out the stone, and peel off the skin with a knife as delicately as possible. I put them into bottles, either in halves or quarters, according to the size of the mouth, and shake them on the stool to fill up the vacancies. I add to each bottle from 12 to 15 almonds. I cork them and put them into the water bath to receive one boiling only, and I instantly withdraw the fire with the same precaution as made use of in the preparation of the currants, and Section 37. Peaches and nectarines. Pechis, brugnons. The Gros Mignon and the Calend are the two kinds of peach which unite the most flavor and perfume. For one of these, I take the best I can meet with. I gather the nectarine, brugnon more ripe than the peach, because it supports the heat better, and on the other hand, I leave the skin on it in order to preserve it. Moreover, the same process is observed as in preserving the nectarine, the peach, and the apricot, in every instance watching the water bath closely, as I do in preserving the bunches of currants. Section 38. Prunes from green gages and plums. Prunes de Rainclaude et Mirabelles. I have made prunes of whole green gages, including the stone and the stalk, as well as of other great plums, and even of Perdrigons and Albergs which succeeded very well. But there are these inconveniences in preserving the largest fruits whole, that few of these large plums can be put into even a large jar, since the vacancies cannot be filled up by shaking the fruit without altogether crushing them, and that when the heat of the water bath is applied to them, they shrink and the jars are found half empty. In consequence, I have abandoned this too expensive mode and am accustomed to preserve all these large plums, cut in halves, after having taken out the stone. This is the easiest and most economical manner, corks of a sufficiently large size for large objects being very dear and also rare. When the cork is very fine, the vessels too which have a narrow or middling neck are more easy to be well corked, and the operation is in consequence more certain. As to the Mirabelle a small white plum, and all other small plums, I prepare them with the stone in them, after having taken off the stalk, for they are in this way easier to shake close, and they leave but few vacancies in the bottles. In general, I observe, in the preservation of all these prunes, either whole or cut in halves, the same process, care, and attention, which I have pointed out under the head of apricots and peaches. Section 39. Pears of every kind, when the pears are peeled and cut into quarters, and the pips with their husks are taken out, I put them into bottles, and in order to place them in the water bath, I carefully attend to the degree of heat they have to receive, which, if they are of a kind usually eaten raw, should not be more than sufficient to make the water bath boil. When the preserve consists of pears usually stewed or boiled, then I let them remain boiling in the water bath 5 or 6 minutes. Pears which have fallen from the tree require a quarter of an hour's boiling, and Section XL. Chestnuts, truffles, and mushrooms, marrons, truffes, et champignons, I pierce chestnuts at the point with the point of a knife, as if I meant to roast them. I put them in bottles, and give them one boiling in the water bath. Having well washed and brushed the truffles in order to take away all the soil, I cut off the upper part gently with a knife. Then I put them into bottles either whole or in pieces, according to the diameter of the neck. The remainder I put in bottles apart, the whole being well corked, and I put them in the water bath to receive an hour's boiling, and It is not necessary to recommend that the truffles should be sound and recently gathered. I take mushrooms fresh from the bed, well formed and firm. Having peeled and washed them, I put them in a saucepan on the fire, with a piece of butter or some good olive oil, in order to make them eject their liquor. I leave them on the fire till this liquor is reduced 1/2. I withdraw them in order to let them grow cool in a pan, after which I bottle them and give them one good boiling in the water bath. Section XLI. The juice of the grape or must. During the vintage of 1808, I took black grapes, carefully gathered from the vine, after having taken away the rotten and green grapes and stripped the others from the stalks. I squeezed them upon a fine sieve, and afterwards put into a press the husks which remained on the sieve, in order to extract the remainder of the juice, and then put the produce both of the sieve and the press into one cask. Having let it stand in this state 24 hours, I put it in bottles and to give it one good boiling in the water bath. When the operation was completed, I withdrew the bottles from the boiler. The action of the fire had precipitated the little color which the grape juice had assumed during the preparation, and it was become very white. I then placed it in my laboratory in a rack as if it had been wine. I repeated all these experiments on the 10th of September, 1809, in the presence of the special commission nominated by His Excellency the Minister of the Interior, composed of the most distinguished persons of the profession. New experiments which I have begun, as well as others which I purpose to make on various objects, will be detailed in a memoir which I shall publish as soon as I shall be able to speak of their result. Of the mode of making use of the substances which have been preserved. Section 42. Meat, game, poultry, fish, meat which has in the preparatory dressing, as well as the boiling it received in the water bath, received its due quantity of cooking, will, when it is taken to be used, require only to be properly warmed in order to produce both soup and meat, potage et bouillie. For the sake of greater economy, and to lessen the number of bottles and jars wanted, it is better to make in the first instance a good gravy as already pointed out by me. For both the beef and the gravy need only to be warmed, and by adding 1/2 or 2/3 of water to the gravy a good soup is provided. In this manner, a bottle containing a_liter_ of gravy may, by adding 2_liters_ of boiling water to it at the moment that it is to be used, and adding a little salt, furnish a dozen good messes. Thus it is easy at a very slight expense to keep a little stock of provisions against an emergency and hot weather, when it is so difficult to procure them, more especially in the country. All meat, poultry, game, and fish which have received 3/4 of their dressing in the preparatory process, and the remainder in the water bath, as already pointed out, may, when taken out of the vessels, be heated to the proper degree in order to be instantly served at table. If, for instance, the substance taken from the bottle or jar had not received either enough previous dressing or enough heat from the water bath, it is immediately put on the fire in order to supply what is deficient. Consequently, when the operator has taken due care in making his preparations, having properly seasoned and dressed them, the use to be made of them afterwards will at all events be easy and convenient. For on the one hand they will need only to be warmed, and on the other hand they may, if necessary, be eaten cold. Substances thus prepared and preserved do not, as might be imagined, require to be consumed as soon as they are opened. Provisions may be used from a vessel 8 or 10 days after it has been uncorked, care being taken only to replace the cork as soon as the necessary part of the provision has been taken out. Besides, it is easy to regulate the size of the vessels from 1 to 25_liters_ or more, according to the rapidity of the expected consumption. See the report made to the Société d'Encouragement pour l'Industrie Nationale by Mr. Bourriet, in the name of the committee. 2 bottles, one of milk, the other of whey, after remaining uncorked from 20 to 30 days, had been recorked with little cork. Nevertheless, the two substances retained all their properties. Section 43. Jellies made of meat and poultry. A well-prepared and preserved jelly, carefully taken in pieces out of the jar, may be used to garnish cold dishes, or it may be even dissolved in the water bath, the vessel containing it being first uncorked. Afterwards it may be poured in a dish to congeal again before it is made use of. Under an infinity of circumstances, a cook may be in want of the substances necessary to make a sauce with. But with the essences of meat, poultry, ham, and sea, as well as with the provision of jelly well preserved and prepared, they may be furnished in an instant. The broth or jelly prepared and preserved as pointed out in page 46 is eaten either cold as it is found in the bottles, or diluted with more or less boiling water, in the proportions which persons of experience may judge suitable in the several instances. Section 44. Milk and cream, cream, milk and whey, prepared and preserved in the manner already pointed out, are used in the same way and for the same daily purposes as the same articles when fresh. Since cream and milk are perfectly preserved in this manner, there is no doubt that dessert creams might be preserved by a similar process, as well as those which are used for ices. These, having been well prepared and completed before they are put into bottles, will only require to be gently warmed in the water bath, the bottles being uncorked, in order to facilitate its coming out of the vessel. In this manner creams and ices may be furnished instantly. Section XLV. Vegetables. Vegetables put into bottles without being dressed and entirely submitted to the action of heat in the water bath, as before described, require to be prepared for use on being taken out of the bottles. This preparation will be made according to the season and everyone's taste and inclination. Attention must be given to the washing of the vegetables when taken from the bottle, and to facilitate the taking them out, I fill the bottle with lukewarm water, and after having drained it of the first water, I wash the vegetables in a second water somewhat hotter, and having drained them, I then prepare them for a meat or vegetable soup. Section 46. French beans, haricots, I scald French beans, _haricots verts _comma, as if they were fresh in water, with a little salt when not sufficiently dressed by the preserving process. This often happens to them as well as to artichokes, asparagus, and cauliflowers. If sufficiently boiled, on being taken out of the bottles, I have only to wash them in hot water in order to prepare them afterwards for vegetable or meat soup. I scald in the same way the beans of the _haricot blanc_. When sufficiently dressed, I take them from the fire and leave them in the boiling water, half an hour and even an hour in order to render them more tender. I then prepare them for soup. Section 47. Peas, beans, and green peas are dressed in various ways. If they are ill-cooked in the season, it is the cook who is blamed, but if they are not found good in winter, the fault is thrown on the person who has preserved them, though the fault most frequently arises from some of the substances employed, either from the bad butter or the oil or rancid fat which is made use of through negligence or economy. At another time they are prepared 2 hours too soon. They are suffered to stick to the bottom of the saucepan when on the fire, and they are served smelling of the butter, which is turned into oil with a burnt taste, or they are prepared without care and with too much precipitation. It is thus we see green peas brought to the table swimming in water, but everyone has his way. The following is mine. As soon as the peas have been washed and immediately afterwards drained, for neither this vegetable nor the Windsor bean must be suffered to remain in water, for that would take away their flavor. I put them on the fire in a saucepan with a morsel of good fresh butter. I add to them a bunch of parsley and chives. After having tossed them several times in butter, I dredge them with a little flour and moisten them immediately afterwards with boiling water up to the level of the peas. I leave them thus to be boiled a good quarter of an hour until very little sauce remains. Then I season them with salt and a little pepper and leave them on the fire until they are stewed down. I then take them off the fire immediately in order to add a piece of fresh butter as large as a nut, with a tablespoonful of powdered sugar for each bottle of peas. I toss them well without replacing them on the fire until the butter is melted, and I serve them up in the shape of a pyramid upon a dish, which I take care to warm thoroughly. I have observed several times that by adding sugar to the peas when upon the fire and giving them only one boiling, the peas became hard and the sauce ran so that it could no longer bind the peas together. Thus great attention should be given to the not putting in the sugar and the last piece of butter until the moment of serving them up. This is the only way of dressing them well, for neither in summer nor winter ought any sauce to appear among the peas. There is another mode of eating green peas, and which may suit many persons. This consists in simply boiling the peas in water. When done, the water is drained off and the peas are tossed with a piece of good fresh butter, salt, pepper, and sugar, all together over a very gentle fire. They are then served up directly upon a very hot dish. Care must be taken that the peas do not boil with the seasoning, otherwise the butter turns into oil and the green peas are dissolved in the water. I cook the small Windsor beans as well with as without their skin, by the same process and with the same attentions which I observe in dressing green peas. I make an excellent soup maker with large preserved peas which are equally good for a meat soup. As to asparagus, artichokes, cauliflowers, and they are dressed in the usual way after having been washed, and green peas, beans, French beans, and all kinds of vegetables may be 3/4 boiled, seasoned at the same time, as is done when intended for immediate use, put into bottles or other vessels when cool, corked, and allowed 1/2 hours boiling in the water bath. By these means vegetables will be preserved and quite ready, which may be made use of in an instant, without any other care than to warm them, and there are also many instances in which these vegetables may be eaten cold. In this way all difficulties may be removed in traveling by land or water. Section 48. Spinach and succory. I dress spinach and succory as usual, in either vegetable or meat soup. Each bottle of A_liter_ contains 2 or 3 dishes, either of spinach or succory according to their strength. When I want to make use of a part only, I recork the bottle, which I keep for another day. Section 49. Vegetable soups. underscore having emptied a bottle containing a underscore liter underscore of preserved underscore julienne underscore, I add 2 underscore liters underscore of boiling water with a little salt, and I have a dish for 12 or 15 persons. As well as a julienne, a underscore colita racines underscore, a soup of lentils, carrots, onions, and c. Being well prepared, furnishes with the greatest economy, excellent dishes in an instant. All farinaceous substances, such as oatmeal, rice, spelt, semolia, vermicelli, and in general everything that may be formed into a paste, nutritive and easy of digestion, may be prepared and seasoned with either vegetable or meat soup, and even with milk before they are made to undergo the preserving process, in order to facilitate the use of them at sea and in armies at a moment of necessity. Section L. Underscore tomates and herbs, underscore I use preserved tomates or underscore love apples underscore in the same manner as those taken fresh in the season. They need only to be properly warmed and seasoned when taken out of the bottle. A underscore sorrel underscore preserved in the manner pointed out does not, when taken out of the bottle, in the least differ from fresh sorrel in June. I make use of it in the same way. As to mint, underscore Montpoivre underscore, and all other plants which may be preserved in bunches, cooks will know how to make the proper use of them, as well as of the juices of herbs. Section L. Underscore preserved fruits, marmalades, and c. Underscore the manner of making use of fruits, preserved by the process I have pointed out, consists first in putting such fruit into a fruit jar in the same state in which it is in the bottle, without adding any sugar, because many persons, more especially ladies, prefer fruits with their natural juice. At the same time I prepare another jar with a preserve of grape syrup or powder sugar for those who prefer it. I have from experience learnt that grape syrup preserves the aroma and agreeable acidity of fruits much better than sugar. This is a very simple and economical mode of preparing an excellent dish of preserved fruits, which is the more convenient, as everyone can satisfy his own taste as to the mixture of sugar with his fruits. 2. In order to make preserves with sugar, underscore compotes sucrés underscore, I take a pound of preserved fruits, it matters not which. This, on being taken out of the bottle, I put, with its juice, over the fire in a skimming pan, mixing with it 4 ounces of grape syrup. As soon as it begins to boil, I withdraw it from the fire and take off the froth by means of a piece of brown paper, which I apply to the surface. As soon as I have skimmed it, I take the fruit gently off the syrup in order to put it into a fruit jar. After having reduced the syrup 1/2 over the fire, I put it upon the fruit in the jar. Fruits thus preserved are sufficiently sweet and have as fine a flavor as a preserve made in the season with fresh fruits. 3D. In order to preserve in brandy either cherries, apricots, greengages, pears, peaches, mirabelles, and c. Underscore compotes à l'eau de vie underscore, I take a pound of preserved fruit, together with its juice, which I put in a saucepan on the fire, together with 1/4 pound of grape syrup. When ready to boil, I skim it, after which I gently take the fruit from off the syrup and put it in a jar. I leave the syrup on the fire till it is reduced to 1/4 of its bulk. Then I take it from the fire in order to add to it a glass of good brandy, and having mixed the whole, I pour the hot syrup upon the fruit in the jar, which I take care to close well that the fruit may be better penetrated by the syrup, and c. The preserved pear and peach may be alike made use of to make a Burgundy wine conserve with cinnamon, as well as underscore compotes grills underscore. 4th. I make a underscore marmalade underscore, either of apricots, peaches, greengages, or mirabelles, by the following process. I take for 1 pound of preserved fruit, 1/2 pound of grape syrup. I boil the whole together over a quick fire, taking care to stir it well with a spoon to prevent its boiling. When the marmalade is boiled to a slight consistency, I take it off, because the confectionery, which is the least boiled, is the best. As preserved fruits afford a facility of making confectionery just when it is wanted, they may, by a little boiling only, be had at any time, fresh and of excellent quality. Section L. Underscore currant jam, Underscore the mode of making currant jam with the juice of this preserved fruit is quite simple. I put half a pound of sugar to 1 pound of currant juice, which ought to be perfumed with a little raspberry. Having clarified and dissolved my sugar, I put the currant juice to it and give it 3 or 4 boilings, and when it falls from the skimmer in small lumps not larger than a lentil, I take it from the fire to put it in jars and see. Section 53. Underscore syrup of currants, underscore. In order to make syrup of currants, I warm the juice of this fruit till it is ready to boil. I then strain it through a cloth. By these means I obtain the juice, limpid and freed from its mucilage. When strained, I add half a pound of grape syrup to a pound of fruit and put the whole on the fire together. When boiled to the consistence of a slight syrup, I take it from the fire to put it in bottles when it is cold. There is a very simple and economical mode of making use, not only of currant juice, but that of all fruits which are employed to compose an acid beverage. This mode consists merely in putting into a glass of water slightly sweetened with grape syrup, a tablespoonful of the juice of preserved currant, or of any other fruit that may be at hand, which is poured into another glass and then drank off. This mode is the more convenient because it will be always easy to have these preserved juices at hand, or to procure them at a small expense. In this way my family has been, for the space of 15 years, in the habit of making use of currant juice, and most frequently we prepare this substitute for lemonade, without either sugar or syrup. Section Live. Underscore ices. Underscore I have prepared and made, in the mode usually employed in the fruit season, ices of currants, raspberries, apricots, and peaches, as well as strawberries, preserved in the manner pointed out by me. I made these experiments before the late improvement in the art of making grape syrup, but now that this production has been brought nearly to perfection, the syrup of the acid grape manufactured by Mr. Privat of Mies will soon advantageously supply the place of the juice of the sugar cane in the preparation of the ices of fruit. As I have already observed, the grape syrup preserves the aroma of all fruits better than sugar. Sugar overpowers to so great a degree the taste of the fruits that it is necessary to add some lemons to the ices of fruits in order, as it were, to bring out the aroma. When therefore the juice of an acid grape shall be made use of, the lemons will become unnecessary, and the ices of fruit will be the richer. The sweet syrups of the grape will be successfully made use of with all ice creams. Section LV. Underscore cordials, underscore liqueurs, underscore, I have composed liqueurs and ratifies with the juice of preserved fruits and sweetened with grape syrup. These preparations yielded in nothing to the best homemade liqueurs. The simple and easy modes which I have pointed out, of preparing every kind of preserved fruit for daily use, prove sufficiently that this method, as sure as it is useful, will introduce the greatest economy in the consumption of the produce of the sugar cane. The consumer, and more especially the manufacturer, who is obliged to lay in during summer a considerable stock of this foreign commodity for syrups, liqueurs, and confectionery, as well as all the objects of pharmacy, may dispense with it. For it will be sufficient if they lay in an adequate stock of fruit in the season, and prepare it in the manner pointed out, to be exempt from the necessity of preparing it with sugar, except on an emergency, and in the quantities actually wanted. It will follow that the greater part of all these fruits will be preserved, altogether without, or at least with a small quantity of sugar, that many of them will be prepared with grape syrup, and that the sugar from the cane will be made use of only for indispensable objects, or to comply with the old habits and gratify the luxury of a few. It will follow that in a plentiful year, sugar will not be necessary in order to provide against a scanty season, and that, with a slight expense, the same enjoyment will be derived from the preserved produce of 2, 3, and 4 years, as from a year of plenty. Section LVI. Underscore chestnuts, truffles, mushrooms, underscore. On taking the chestnuts out of the vessel in which they have been preserved, I plunge them in cold water, sprinkle them with a little fine salt, and roast them in a pan over a quick fire. In this manner they are excellent. The moistening them and the putting salt upon them may be dispensed with, but they must always be roasted over a quick fire. I make the same use of preserved truffles and mushrooms as of those recently gathered. Section 57. Grape juice or must. When I made my first experiments of preserving grape juice in its fresh state, I was unacquainted with Mr. Parmentier's information concerning the means of furnishing a substitute for sugar in the principal uses made of it in medicine and domestic economy. Q. It is this valuable information which supplied me with the means of availing myself of fresh experiments and making use of 200 bottles of grape juice preserved by me 6 months before. Q. L'instruction sur les moyens de suppléer le sucre dans les principaux usages qu'on en fait pour la médecine et l'économie domestique par M. Parmentier. First, I made very good grape syrup, following the process of Mr. Parmentier, which is literally as follows. Preparation of grape syrup. You take 24 French pints of grape juice and put 1/2 of it in a boiler placed on the fire, with the precaution of not suffering it to boil with too much force. You add fresh juice as that in the boiler evaporates. You skim it and stir the surface to add to the evaporation. When the whole of the juice has been put into the boiler, you skim it. You take the boiler off the fire and add some liashes tied up in a cloth or whiting _Spain Spanish or Troy white or chalk reduced to a powder, and first diluted in a little grape juice until it no longer effervesces or, as it were, boils in the liquor which was shaken. By these means, the acid contained in the grape is separated and neutralized. In order to try the liquor, put blue paper into it, and when it does not turn red, then you may be satisfied that the liquor is no longer acid. Replace the boiler on the fire, after having let it settle an instant, and put in 2 whites of beaten eggs. Strain the liquor through a woolen cloth, fixed on a wooden frame of 12 or 15 square inches, so that it occupies little room, then boil again, and continue the evaporation. In order to know whether the syrup be sufficiently condensed, let some drop from a spoon upon a plate. If the drop falls without spurting or spreading, or if when divided, the halves run into each other again but slowly, then you may infer that it has acquired the proper consistency. Pour it into an earthen vessel which is not varnished, and when completely cold, transfer it to vessels of a moderate size, neat, dry, and well corked, and placed it in the cellar. A bottle once opened should not remain long only half filled, and when you make use of it, take care to hold the neck downwards. It is hardly possible to determine precisely the quantity of chalk or ashes necessary to be used. Less is required in the south than in the north, but at all events, more than is necessary will do no harm, since it remains upon the straining cloth with the other insoluble salts and the skim. If in order to preserve these syrups for a longer time, you were to carry on the boiling too long, you would find yourself mistaken, for the syrup would not fail to crystallize at the bottom of the vessel, while the body would become thin. On the other hand, if the syrup were not sufficiently evaporated, it would soon ferment. A housekeeper who has made these syrups twice will have learnt the degree of boiling which ought to be given to the syrup, better than can be taught her by rule. Syrups and ratifies. With this same syrup, I have prepared preserves, confectionery, syrups, and beverages, as well as liqueurs and ratifies of all the kinds of fruit I have spoken of. 2d. I made syrup of the same grape juice and by the same process, except that I boiled the latter, but slightly, that is, 1/4 less than the former, as I wished to satisfy myself whether it would be preserved by the application of heat to the water bath, in the way before pointed out. Having prepared my syrup, I put it when cold, into 3 half bottles, 1 full and the other 1/4 empty. I corked and sealed the bottles, and let them remain in the water bath only till it boiled, and see. I remarked no difference in the full and half-full bottles, and all 3 were completely preserved. 3d. I took 6 pints of preserved grape juice, to which I added 2 pints of good old proof brandy, and also 2 pounds of grape syrup, which I had prepared. This preparation which I mixed well, I made use of to compose 4 kinds of liqueur, by means of infusions of apricot kernels, mint, orange flower, badian, which I had prepared before. These liqueurs, having been well strained, were found very good and sufficiently sweet. Fourth, I took 2 bottles of preserved grape juice, which I poured into 2 other fit bottles. I corked and tied these bottles and left them standing upright 10 days. During this interval, the liquor caused its cork to burst, like the best champagne wine, and mantled in the same way. Fifth, I repeated this last experiment in the same manner. At the end of 12 or 15 days, observing no appearance of fermentation in the bottles, I uncorked them in order to let in the air, and I then put into them a tablespoonful of preserved raspberry juice. Having recorked and sealed them, I let them remain 8 days longer upright. At the end of that time, both the white and the red juice, _Le Blanc et le Rose _, caused the cork to spring out. They mantled completely and were very agreeable to the taste, particularly the red, perfumed with raspberry. After these experiments made of the _Massy _grape, in the department of _Seine and Oise _, it is more than probable that in the fine vineyards of the south, infinitely more precious results will be drawn from the making use of this method. Grape juice will be preserved there in order, by congelation, to reduce it at will to the consistence of syrup, after having taken away its acid for the sweet syrup, or if the juice be condensed over the fire. The quantity of boiling made use of for condensing the syrup will, by the operation of heat in the water bath in any preparatory process, be rendered immaterial for the preservation of the syrup for several years. The original is more precise and refers to an instrument made use of in France for ascertaining the density of liquors, an areometer, which, at least in its application to grape syrup, is unknown in this country. The words are _les degrés de cuisson de 25, 30, ou 33 à l'aréometer, deviant indifferent pour conserver CS syrups _and C. T by means of this process, which is easy to be put in practice and of little expense in the execution, syrups may be obtained clear and white, even when produced from black grapes and of a pure sweetness, free from a certain flavor of molasses and burnt sugar, from which it has not hitherto been found possible to exempt grape syrup, when boiled in the ordinary mode, sufficient for its preservation. Thus this precious production, preserved in bottles and vessels of every size, may be transported to a great distance and in all seasons, coming from Bergerac, Mies, and all the manufactories of the South, to improve the produce of our small vineyards, and make all classes of society share in the enjoyment of this useful resource. Section 58. General observations. From this detail of experiments, it is obvious that this new method of preserving animal and vegetable substance proceeds from the simple principle of applying heat in a due degree to the several substances, after having deprived them as much as possible of all contact with the external air. It might on the first view of the subject be thought that a substance, either raw or previously acted upon by fire, and afterwards put into bottles, might, if a vacuum were made in those bottles and they were completely corked, be preserved equally well with the application of heat in the water bath. This would be an error, for all the trials I have made have convinced me that the absolute privation of the contact of external air, the internal air being rendered of no effect by the action of heat, and the application of heat by means of the water bath, are both indispensable to the complete preservation of alimentary substances. My object is not like that of the Bordeaux chymists to disunite the component parts of the animal substance and obtain the animal jelly in a separate state, as well as the animal fiber, free from its juice and so made to resemble tan leather. Neither is it my endeavor to furnish at a great expense, as in the preparation of portable soup, a tenacious paste or glue, better adapted to derange the stomach than to provide it with a salutary nourishment. My problem is to preserve all nutritive substances with all their peculiar and constituent qualities. My experiments prove that I have resolved this problem. Some persons of enlightened understandings, but who have, perhaps, delivered themselves over to the spirit of system and prejudice, have declared themselves against my method, alleging a pretended impossibility. But is it then difficult on the principles of a sound, natural philosophy to assign a reason for the preservation of alimentary substance by my process? May we not infer that the application of caloric or heat to the water bath operates in producing a gentle fusion of the constituent fermenting principles so as to destroy the predominating agency of fermentation? This agency is an essential condition of fermentation, at least if it's taking place with a certain promptitude. Further, there is no fermentation without air. This being also excluded by my method, we have two assignable causes for its success, the theory of which appears to flow naturally from the means practically employed. Indeed, if we refer to any of the methods made use of and any of the experiments and observations of ancient and modern times upon the preservation of alimentary substances with which we are acquainted, we shall find that fire is everywhere the principal agent, either in the natural duration or in the artificial preservation of vegetable and animal substances. Fabroni has proved that heat applied to grape juice or must destroys the fermentation of this vegeto-animal which is preeminently leaven Thenard has made like experiments on cherries, gooseberries, and other fruits. The experiments of the late Valaris and of Mr. Casals learned chemists at Bordeaux, who have dried meat by means of stoves, equally prove that the application of heat destroys the agents of putrefaction. Drying, boiling, evaporating, as well as the caustic and savory substances which are employed in the preservation of alimentary productions, all serve to shew that caloric in its various modes of application produces the same effects. It is to the solution of this problem that I have devoted my fortune and 20 years of labor and meditation. Happy that I have already been able to render service to my fellow citizens and humanity, I rely on the justice, generosity, and intelligence of a wise government, which never fails to encourage useful discoveries. That government will perceive that the inventor of this method of preservation could not obtain from the invention itself an indemnification for his labor and expense. The chief importance of this process lies in its subservience to the wants of civil and military hospitals, and particularly of the Navy. It is in these departments of the public service that my process may be employed in a manner advantageous to the state, and it is from them that I may receive the just reward of my labors. I expect everything from the beneficent views of the minister, and my expectations will not be disappointed. Section Licks. Practical remarks. The bottles and other vessels of every kind fit for the preservation of alimentary substances will occasion but a very slight expense at one time. They may be always used again, if care be taken to rinse them as soon as they are empty. Good corks, string, and wire are not expensive. As soon as the method is known, proper bottles and jars will be met with at the manufacturers. Corks of every size and properly prepared for use will be furnished by the cork cutters, as well as iron wire fit for use. It will be always advisable to procure corks before bottles, and in that case no other bottles need be purchased than such as may have necks suited to the size of the corks, for I have been often unable to procure corks of such a size as I could wish. The glass houses of lage _, _seves and de Premonters near Corsiluchateau are already accustomed to the manufactory of corks and jars necessary for the preserving process. I am most satisfied with the latter, which has served me for the last 4 years. Good corking depends only on a little practice. It will suffice to cork a dozen bottles with care and exactness in order to familiarize a person with the method. Every day, wine and liquors are bottled and transported by land and water to the remotest places. Even glass vessels containing from 40 to 80 liters in measure have been sent to a great distance, full of oil of vitriol and other liquids. It will be the same with animal and vegetable productions, preserved in glass bottles or jars, when sufficient care and attention shall be given them. This is the principal thing required. How many rich liquors and other substances would be better preserved which are either lost or spoiled for want of being well corked? No one will doubt, after all the experiments I have detailed, that the adoption of this new method, which, as may be seen, unites the greatest economy to a perfection unlooked for till the present time, will secure the following advantages. 1. That of considerably diminishing the consumption of sugar, the produce of the cane, and of giving the greatest extension to the manufactories of grape syrup. 2. That of preserving for use in all countries and all seasons a number of alimentary and medicinal productions, which being very abundant in some places at certain seasons, are therefore wasted, being considered as of no value. While the same substances, under other circumstances, being much wanted, become of double and even fourfold value, and sometimes cannot be procured at any price, such as butter and eggs. 3. That of procuring for civil and military hospitals, and even for the armies the most valuable assistance, the details of which would be superfluous here. But the great advantage of this method consists principally in its application to the service of the Navy. It will supply fresh and wholesome provisions for His Majesty's vessels on long voyages, with a saving of more than 50%. Mariners will in case of illness be furnished with broth, various and cooling beverages, vegetables and fruits. In a word, they will be able to partake of a number of alimentary and medicinal substances, which will alone be sufficient to prevent or cure the diseases contracted at sea, more especially the worst of them all, the scurvy. These advantages eminently merit the public attention when we reflect that salted provisions, and, above all, their bad qualities, have caused the loss of more lives at sea than shipwrecks and naval engagements. 4. Medicine will find in this method the means of relieving humanity, by the facility of meeting everywhere, and in all seasons, animal substances and all kinds of vegetables, as well as their juices,